All right, guys. Once again, welcome. My name is Shana. I will be your moderator for this evening. Miss Dawn is the individual who has initiated this entire program with Saving Island Green. She's the one, if you guys noticed, has got started with her concerns and got everybody involved, and here we are today wanting to do a full discussion on what's going on and what we can do to help fix our problems. So as of right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miss Dawn. She's going to start off with some opening remarks.
To share my concerns. Shortly after the incident, I learned that a new development was approved and it would replace the natural wild beauty of Island Green. Knowing the area is prone to flooding and residents have been expressing concerns about overdevelopment and public safety issues, I figured out what could be done to preserve the critical habitat. I started doing my own research. I used my camera to document everything, no matter how insignificant. I captured Peach Creek from one end of Island Green to the other. My videos and photos of Peach Creek helped expert hydrologist Dr. Stephen Emermen with his hydrology report. I also discovered and photographed a rare species in South Carolina, the limpkin, as well as the wood stork, which is on the endangered species list. Both unique to Island Green and utilize our surrounding land for habitat. I also learned from Fish and Wildlife Department an endangered plant called the American cashweed was located on Freewood's farm directly across the road from Island Green. A bird or any kind of animal could have brought seeds to Island Green, and it's a possibility that it is growing here. We don't know because an environmental impact statement, an EIS or survey, has never been done. After all, it's not a law requiring it to be done. If the study had been done, we would have known sooner about the rare birds here. The limpkins have been seen and photographed breeding here, and if successful, this pair of limpkins will be the second pair documented in the entire state of South Carolina, and living right here in Island Green. Birders have come from other states just to photograph our limpkins, but unfortunately the developer isn't fazed by a rare bird living in our community. And I'm afraid of what a bulldozer could do to these birds or other wildlife for that matter. An EIS should be a law so we don't lose any more endangered or even rare species. If an environmental impact study had been done, it would show potential impacts the new development is going to have on flooding, a grave concern many current residents share. Development here is feared by this community, mostly because of the possibility of more flooding because of losing almost 200 acres of trees and a natural creek that could end up being damaged, which in turn could damage the Walkmall National Wildlife Refuge, which is federally protected land. I now have to bring up the huge issue, which is the safety of the current residents by adding more homes to an already overdeveloped community. You bypassed the county's own land development regulations and increased our risk, allowing the developer to increase density with only one road to enter and exit. In Mr. Neve's words, I've got to vote and I'm going to do what I think is responsible. I think the safety of the road is more important than the second entrance. Venture Engineering's own study on Sunhanna Drive shows 7,000 trips in a 24-hour period. And that's just the number of people who live here now. Our community is no longer safe because we only have one road. You need to stand up for the people of this community, constituents who voted for you, trusted you and their safety. The developer will fix the road eventually, but it will absolutely not fix the fear of flooding and having only one means of egress. does not address our
Hey, can I call
safety
you back
concerns
later?
with more people living here.
Alright.
In the event this community has to evacuate, the new people will be the last to get out, since most of the new homes are in the back of the community. Also, more than 1,250 homes of people trying to get out of one entrance into Freewood Road will be a total disaster. The developer has now stopped all buses from all St. James schools from coming into Island Green and dropping off children. He told them that Sunnyhanna Drive is private property, which is true, but these buses have been dropping off children in Island Green for years, and now he wants to stop them. The buses now have to stop across the street from the entrance of Island Green, where there is no crosswalk or traffic light. Heaven forbid a car doesn't stop for that bus when a child is crossing. Plus, a lot of these children live in the very back of Island Green. Young children whose families have one car and one parent working. The lack of commitment to local safety standards jeopardizes the safety and well-being of the residents of Island Green, especially in an emergency, either natural or man-made. Neglecting the community's safety and well-being has led to residents moving away, some who have lived here 10, 20, even 30 years. I believe what is happening in Island Green is wrong, and I will continue to fight for this community's safety, to end their fear of flooding, and hopefully at the same time save the beautiful wildlife and nature. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for that, Dawn. Now, real quick, we're just going to go ahead and kind of introduce some of our panelists. First off, I have Mr. Craig Watson. Mr. Craig, if you'd like to just briefly introduce yourself to the group.
Okay, thank you very much. Craig Watson, I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I work out of the Charleston office, but don't really work for the field supervisor and folks there. But I work for a division of migratory birds out of the regional office, but just co-located in the Charleston office. So birds are my specialty. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for that, Craig. We also have Mr. Stephen Emermen. Mr. Emermen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Stephen Emermen. I'm the hydrology consultant for Saving Island Green in South Carolina. I'm also working with the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League. I'm based in Spanish Fork, Utah right now, but I was born in Charleston, and very happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for that. And I just want to let you guys know we also have Mr. Gary Loftus, one of our council members, here with us as well. Mr. Loftus, thank you so very much for being with us. To get started, one of the first things that we want to discuss is going to be the significance on flooding in our neighborhoods and our communities. As we know, there have been several communities along the Waccamaw and the Intercoastal that have been flooded in the past, and there's different things going on. Absolutely, Dawn. Give me just a second on that one. So one of the things that we want to talk about is going to be the flooding first. I was just told to introduce Miss Gabrielle as well. Miss Gabrielle, if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Gabrielle. I'm a community science fellow with the American Geophysical Union's Thriving Earth Exchange. I was asked to give a little bit of an introduction about this, so I'll just put that in here unless you want me to wait. So the Thriving Earth Exchange is a program that was set up with the goal of matching scientists with communities to help communities run a scientific project that can help address their priorities or their challenges to help improve the communities. And so as a fellow, I'm running a project working with Island Green, and we're going to be working on a project related to flooding. And so we've just finished scoping the project and getting an outline, and we officially have a website now that I'll put in the chat if you want to check it out. And we're going to be entering the phase where we're looking for a scientist who can help work with the community. And then after a few months, we'll hopefully have a report or other type of outcome from the project that can help give more information about the flooding in the community and how this development might affect that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Gabrielle. So again, we're going to go ahead and start off with the flooding issue. So obviously we all know that, flooding in Island Green is a big concern. But with the continuation of the construction is the worry about current areas that have been getting flooded becoming even more flooded. So let's go ahead. Gabrielle, did you want to go ahead and start off with like the flooding, what you've seen so far, from what you've learned, and what you think the best plan of action is?
So I'm a project manager on this, but I'm not a flood expert. I'm a physicist and seismologist, so
Right.
I can't speak too much about the flooding itself. So this is why we're going to be looking for scientists to bring in who can help us write this report and help us figure out what that outcome will be.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we don't really have anything other than like our project plan. So it'll be probably a few months until that project is actually carried out and has a result.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I don't know that I have too much. I've seen the pictures, so I know you guys have flooding, and hopefully what we're able to do with this project will help improve. Will help give you more information to improve the situation.
Now, speaking on the flooding, we did recently learn that Peach Creek happens to be a natural man-made, or a natural creek and not man-made, that's going into the environment. And Dr. Emermen, I think you were the one that was that had actually done the report on that, if I recall.
That's right.
Okay, so you've determined that it is absolutely natural and not man-made. Is that correct?
Yes, but just let me clarify, okay? Because there's not going to be any stream in South Carolina or anywhere on the East Coast of North America that has not been impacted by human activity, okay, in some way.
Right.
But the question I was asking was, does Peach Creek have a natural origin, and does it retain a dominantly natural character? And the answer to that is definitely yes. Okay, so it did not originate as a man-made feature. It originated as a natural stream and still has the characteristics of a natural stream.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that for me. It's
Okay.
one of the biggest things, in order to get everybody to understand essentially what is going on. So Dawn, did you have a first question that you wanted to ask in relation to Peach Creek or to the flooding?
I wanted to ask
Hey!
Mr. Loftus if he knew that we had a natural creek running through Island Green when the plans were made for this development.
Stop it.
You're on mute, Mr. Loftus.
I apologize for that. I'm technically challenged. I just learned about it about 6 months ago, and this, of course, Island Green's been there for quite some time. And actually, with the golf course there, life was good. I live in Deerfield, so I had a golf course too, and no longer. So, understandably, I do know what you're dealing with. But as to Peach Creek, no, I did not know about it, as I said, till about 6 months ago.
The plans that Mr. Williamson approached everyone with does not even show Peach Creek at all. He shows them as being wetlands. And I believe wetlands and a natural creek are two different entities.
Well, I have no idea what he presented. And I must preface everything by saying the county council had absolutely nothing. We never saw any of this. It wasn't required to come to county council, believe it or not. It was all handled by staff and by the planning commission. So I'm on a learning curve along with a lot of other people. But,
Well,
so
with
I'm not
this
familiar with what Mr. Williamson brought to the county.
with this new development of Peach Creek being a natural creek, should these plans be looked over again and show Peach Creek as a natural creek? I mean, I know developments have filled in wetlands, but I don't believe you're supposed to fill in or damage a natural creek. And he plans on crossing over Peach Creek with two-lane roads in this new development of his here.
Well, I will check with planning, but he can't. We have the strictest regulations regarding wetlands and everything such as that in the entire state. So I'll have to check with, as I said again, it was never brought to county council, so I'm again on a learning curve with a lot of other people, and I will check with planning to see what he did bring and what the wetlands delineation is.
Well, okay. Going forward, is there any way to ensure that development plans are taken into account people's safety? Or what's the relationship between the county council and the developers?
None. The die was cast many years ago as far as this development is concerned, and as I said, design modification was how he presented it, and as a result, it never does come to county. It never did come to county council. It didn't have to by the rules and regs that we go by. So again, as I said, I'm on a learning curve along with everybody else. I was not privy to anything that was discussed at Planning Commission. We, by law, we can't interfere with the Planning Commission. So, you know, they did what they did, and it was without our knowledge or without our advice or without our input, and which is not unusual, unfortunately, in this case. So I'm here and I'm learning along with the rest of you, but I can find out what the wetland delineation is. Well, you can as well. Fish and Wildlife and Department of Natural Resources and the Corps of Engineers will have the wetlands delineation.
Is there anyone of the residents who'd like to ask a question? Okay, I'm going to bring up the question about these buses that Mr. Williamson have stopped from coming into Island Green. Is there anything you can do about that? He has now told both, elementary, intermediate, and high school buses they are no longer allowed on Sunnyhanna Drive because it's private property. And there's a big safety issue with these buses now stopping across the street from our entrance.
Well, you know, that's an issue I don't know that you need to address with Mr. Ken Richardson, who not only is chairman of the school board, but is currently running for the 7th congressional seat. He probably is inclined to help you as much as he possibly can. But that's a school issue. I don't know about buses except I stop when the lights are flashing, and I have one at the end of my street. So, and of course, the only time I see the school buses is when I'm late for something. But that's Ken Richardson is the one you have to get in touch with regarding the schools. And I can't, if they've always gone down Sunnyhanna to drop the kids off, why, you know, I obviously Mr. Williamson is not your best next door neighbor, but somehow that just doesn't sound right. So, but that's a Ken Richardson question.
Okay, are there other residents who would like to ask a question? We have lots of time here. Y'all,
I think Dawn,
What-
let's go ahead and switch over since we've kind of mentioned a little bit about the flooding. I don't know if there's anybody on here that has dealt with the flooding in the past that would like to speak up. We actually just got a question. How many homes have been affected by the flooding in Island Green? That's actually a really good question.
a whole old cul-de-sac and of single-family homes and 3 sets of condos right after Hurricane Florence, and it was actually after Hurricane Florence right there. If you go back one, that is St. George. That and to the right is Blue Tree Court. If you look straight and curve to the left, that whole cul-de-sac of St. George was completely flooded. The trees in the very background, that's the Waccamaw National Wildlife Refuge. That's all wetlands. And after Florence, 14 days after Florence, Island Green filled up with water and flooded this area. The larger picture is when the water was kind of low, but then the insert picture shows they had to use kayaks to get in and out of their homes.
Mr. Loftus, I had a question for you. I know, obviously, with the county, we have had a number of dealings with flooding all throughout the county along both the Waccamaw and the intercoastal. I know that the city of Conway had done a large purchase of damaged property and homes in the Conway region. But are there any other plans that the county has in place to try and help other communities, such as Island Green, for flooding?
Well, I know we had some sort of a buyback program that was instituted quite some time ago. When I say quite some time ago, it's sometime in the last year or two. And it's in large part funded by the state and federal government, but our building requirements for subdivisions, and as I said, we have the strictest stormwater regs in the state, and they just can't build in wetlands. They're delineated wetlands by the Army Corps of Engineers. And by the way, I have some issues with the Corps because I don't think they go far enough. I will say that, but they aren't. They cannot build in wetlands. They just can't do it. And they have to not only provide for their stormwater runoff, they have to do their stormwater plus 25%. So in theory, and again in theory, not only do they take care of their own stormwater, they're supposed to improve the areas around them. Sometimes it doesn't appear that way, and I can understand that. But that's what the regs are, and I'll put our stormwater people up against anybody in the state and in the country for that matter.
Okay.
So
Pam?
a lot of this,
Sorry, Mr.
flooding
Loftus. I apologize. Keep
has
going.
been going on for years. It's just that there weren't houses next door. And my in-laws' house on the waterway is a perfect example. Back, I can't remember which hurricane it was. I've been through more than my share, and they kind of run together. But back in the late 70s, I think it was, they have a property on the intercoastal waterway just north of the Socastee Swing Bridge. And it was in the late 70s when I had to take a canoe to get down to their house on Ed Smith Boulevard. So it was up that high, and they had a house on. It was a part of the old motel that they moved out there, and it was about 4 feet, at least 4 feet off the ground, and there was a cat on the side porch and couldn't go anywhere because of the water, and the water was almost to their floor, so it was a good 3.5 feet deep on their line. That's back in '79. And they experienced the same thing. You know, they've had 3 issues, in the last 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's some of this is nothing new. It's just that there's more people to see it and become somewhat affected by it. So again, I'm back to our stormwater regs that we just don't allow it.
Shana, can you show the FEMA map, please?
I'm sorry?
Kirstie's got control over that one, Dawn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Mr. Loftus, this is the FEMA map showing that all that pink right there, that's mostly the wildlife refuge. And the green area is Island Green. And almost a third of our community is in the pink. And the new areas in the red, that where Mr. Williamson is going to be developing, those homes are in a flood zone.
Well, I'll check with our people with Tom Roth and find out. I promise you, Tom Roth has been out on this project because I've asked him to be there more than one occasion. And I noticed a note from April that said some wetlands can be filled, yes, but not anything that's delineated by the Corps of Engineers. If it's a delineated wetland, they can't be filled. It's that simple. So,
Kirstie, can you show
I'll get an answer from Tom Roth. And here again, I hate to be a Johnny come lately, but this was all, the whole thing got underway, and I didn't really know exactly what was going on until it all hit the fan. And because none of it was brought to county council. That's unfortunately.
This is Mr. Williamson's plan for Island Green, and I put an insert in to kind of enlarge it, but there's where the red lines are, that's where he wrote wetlands on his plan, but that's actually Peach Creek. Like I said, he didn't distinguish between an actual natural creek or wetlands. And those areas where he says it's wetland, it's actually a natural creek. Can you go to the next one, Kirstie? Peach Creek starts up at the top. That's the Waccamaw River up there. And you can see Peach Creek comes behind this one community, the Cypress River Plantation, and then it comes down and it branches off. It goes between the Cypress River Plantation and the Myrtle Beach Golf and Yacht, but then you see it come completely down through Island Green. And the insert shows the entrance of Peach Creek, right at the border of the Waccamaw National Wildlife Refuge. And that's a natural creek. That's not just wetlands. It's a natural creek starting from the Waccamaw River, coming completely down through our community. And that's where we're getting a lot of the flooding. When the Waccamaw River rises, Peach Creek rises.
Dr. Emermen, did you want to, I see you've posted a bunch of stuff in the chat. Did you want to kind of make a response to Mr. Loftus with some of the stuff that you had mentioned?
Oh, I've just been clarifying a few things. Okay. The permit explicitly clarifies that the development will infill 0.18 acres of freshwater wetlands and 0.24 acres of Peach Creek. Also that the most recent stream model for South Carolina, that's the StreamSats model developed jointly by U.S. Geological Survey and South Carolina DOT, clarifies that Peach Creek is a well-defined channel that flows through the wetlands. And anyway, all of this information is in my report.
Excellent.
Okay, I see there's a question from April. Does the permit claim that Peach Creek is a jurisdictional wetland? You have to combine two different documents for that. There's documents from the Army Corps of Engineers and from the U.S. Geological Survey, separate documents that describe Peach Creek as a natural stream and as waters of the United States and as a tidal stream. In the particular permit for this development, it simply talks about infill of Peach Creek without clarifying that there's other documents that describe Peach Creek as a natural stream.
Okay. And Pam Dawson, I just spotted your chat as well. I see that you are the District 4 Planning Commissioner for the county. Is there anything that you wanted to add to this discussion?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pam Dawson, and I am your current District 4 Planning Commissioner. And this is a very interesting project to me. I'm sorry I'm sort of late to the dance here. I joined Planning Commission July 1st of 2020, and this design modification had already been approved. I had followed it somewhat. Previously, I was a board member of the Greater Burgess Community Association, and that association had actually opposed the design modification to Planning Commission when it went through Planning Commission. So I am aware of it. I am aware of some of the facts, and my best suggestion is to continue to try to work through the Horry County Planning Department as best you can. And for those who may not have had the opportunity to view the actual meeting where the design modification was approved, I did include a link to that video in the chat, if that would be of use to anyone. So thank you for having me tonight, and I'm sorry I can't add a lot of clarity for you.
Thank you for that information, Pam. We greatly appreciate that. Even just a little bit goes a long way.
I'm sorry?
Said even just a little bit goes a long way.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being included in the invitation.
Thank you for coming.
April just asked the
pleasure.
question, does the approval violate the Clean Water Act?
I'm not sure who can answer that.
April's got a lot of good questions here. She also asked, do we leverage to challenge in court as well?
Do we have leverage?
Yes, do we have leverage? My bad. It's been a long day. Dr. Emermen, is there anything that you can respond to that one with?
I saw the question was for me, but just keep in mind I'm a hydrologist, not a lawyer. Okay, so that's a better question for you to ask your attorney.
What about the Clean Water Act? Would you know anything about, would it violate the Clean Water Act?
It's kind of the same answer, okay, is that I can't give legal advice. So that's an excellent question for you to ask your attorney.
Okay, so April, we'll definitely keep those questions into consideration, and we'll be sure to try to see if we can get those questions answered for you. I think at this time we're going to kind of move over from the flooding issues to a little bit more with the, I think with the, actually, yes, Gabrielle, you are more than welcome to go ahead and jump in and ask a question. I'm all for it.
Okay, so thank you. I guess this is a good way to kind of end the flooding
That works.
part of this. So we're working, like I said, we're working with the Thriving Earth Exchange to do this project about flooding in the community. And we really want it to be something that's useful and informative for the community. And so with Dawn and Alexis from Anthropocene Alliance, we've had a few meetings so far to kind of think about ideas. But it'd be really helpful to know, especially from the commissioners, if there's something in particular that we could do in this project or in this study that would be helpful. We talked about like outputting a report about flooding and how the development might affect the flooding in the community, but is there any, like, are there maps, are there handouts, like, is there anything that the commissioners or the community that would feel really, would find really useful for dealing with the flooding and the potential impacts that we could incorporate into this project?
Okay. So of course, moving on from that, I think we wanted to do a little bit of discussion about the Limpkins. Mr. Watson, did you want to kind of go through and just explain a little bit about the Limpkins, you know, their backstory, how we think they got here, and what our game plan should be from this point forward?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. So, Limpkins are typically native to Florida only. Wading birds and the limpkin often wander after the breeding season. So over the years, there have been a few limpkins that have wandered northward, and so you pick up observations in, you know, states like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. So I've been here 32 years, and there's just been a couple of observations of limpkin in South Carolina, and typically it's in late summer after these young birds disperse. A couple of years ago, though, however, there was a pair that were noted up on Goose Creek Reservoir in Hanahan in Berkeley County, South Carolina. So we found it interesting that it appeared to be a pair. They eventually were observed mating, and then they established a nest just on an island right behind the neighborhood there. And then last summer, they actually had chicks. So that was the first documented nest of limpkins in South Carolina. So being a birder and a migratory bird biologist, I started researching this quite a bit and found out that Georgia and Louisiana just had their first nest of limpkins in those states, and also the first nesting outside of Florida again. So what those papers indicated is that these exotic apple snails out of Florida are spreading northward and westward out of Florida. So they are in most of coastal South Carolina, and they are certainly along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. So that's what these birds eat, are these apple snails. And the birds are kind of following that resource. So where there's apple snail populations established, limpkins find those, follow them, and apparently stay there, evidenced by new nesting attempts and successful nesting attempts in Louisiana, Georgia, and now South Carolina. So there was a successful nest in Berkeley County last year, and then these limpkins showed up in Island Green community, and it was interesting to me that there were 3 there, so you wouldn't expect that. I visited the site up there and did not see the limpkins, but have seen plenty of photos and everything. There are a lot of those exotic apple snails in the area, and I feel that's why the limpkins are there. It's a great food source. Being that there are 3 birds there, I kind of suspected that they have nested in the area before and no one just knew about it. And because the river bottoms were flooded, it was forced the limpkins out of the swamps and up into Island Green. So of course there's the apple snails up around the ponds in Island Green, and when I visited, the river swamp was down, so you could actually walk out into the swamp, and there are apple snails all throughout that swamp. So that's why the limpkins are there, because of the apple snails. And just since then, and I understand that the limpkins up there have been observed and photographed mating as well. You won't see them now if they're actually nesting, and we don't know that they've actually nested there. We won't know that until we see some chicks up in that region. But anyway, it does appear that limpkins are now nesting in South Carolina. They do not hold any kind of special status under the Endangered Species Act. They're not threatened or endangered. They do, however, classify as a migratory bird and are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And essentially what that entails is you cannot take, the official word is take a bird, and you can look up the definition online, but it's essentially what it boils down to is you cannot kill, harm, destroy a nest, or destroy eggs of the limpkin. And then if there is some kind of suspected take of a limpkin, you actually have to prove that there was like intent to do that. My feeling is that the limpkins, may nest there this year. I wouldn't expect they would nest around the ponds, but one would never know. They're fairly secretive birds when it comes to nesting, so I think they'll probably retreat to the swamp and build a nest where there's plenty of apple snails. But they are using the Island Green community. But no one will know that until we actually discover a nest there or find chicks. As to we just don't know where the nest might be, and those things are difficult to locate. So that's basically it about the limpkins. Any questions about that?
We do have a question. I just want to say real quick. There was a article with DNR that stated that they had found their first apple snail habitat in the Socastee region back in the early 2000s, if I recall from reading that article correctly. It was a small community area in Socastee, and obviously over time it has started to disperse to other areas. One of the questions that was asked was, is the flooding contributing to those apple snails?
We don't know the exact mechanism of how the apple snails are getting here. But yes, the flooding will spread the egg masses of those apple snails. So you can go to the U.S. Geological Survey website and search on exotic apple snails, and you'll come up with an interactive map of where all those snails have been recorded in South Carolina. And it does show the Socastee region and around that as having those apple snails. However, I don't think that map is accurate at this point, because there are probably a lot more occurrences of apple snail out there that people just haven't recorded and reported to that website. So when you go over to the refuge from Island Green and just stand at the edge of Island Green community and look into the refuge, you can see all of the apple snail shells in there. And during a high tide, not a high tide, but floodwaters, all those egg masses will be washed downstream. So I feel very confident that all downstream from there is just probably loaded with those apple snails. Upstream, I don't know how far that goes, but you can look at that website to see what is currently recorded for having apple snails, but I think it's probably inaccurate because it just hasn't been reported. They're pretty common. I mean, they're all over the Charleston, Mount Pleasant area in essentially all these retention ponds that are in these neighborhoods. And there have been a few limpkins over the years that have visited these on a temporary basis. The snails that the limpkins are eating up in Goose Creek Reservoir in Berkeley County are not the exotic apple snail, but they are another exotic snail that has been somehow, placed here. We don't know if it's someone has grown these from an aquarium and released them, but they're much smaller snails. But the limpkins have found those, and that's what they're eating up on Goose Creek. So it's essentially snails and mollusks are what they eat. And everywhere I've been to look at the limpkins and their foraging habitat, they're feeding on these exotic or invasive apple snails or some other Asian snails.
Okay. Do you think the development will harm the nesting or the behavior of the limpkins?
Ask that question again, please.
Do you think that the development will harm the nesting or the behavior?
I don't think so. I watched the limpkins up in Hanahan, and they were in the neighbor's backyard foraging and along the reservoir and eating snails. And when it came time to nest, they retreated over to an island in the reservoir and nested. So when it comes time for these birds to nest, they're going to seek a secluded place away from any disturbance. So a lot of the disturbance at Island Green now is really in the uplands where they're constructing all these homes, and you won't find limpkins in those kind of areas. Now, around the ponds and the creeks, there should be minimal disturbance. I'm not very familiar with the permit that has been issued there. I have seen some emails floating around where they're going to impact possibly up to 1/4 of an acre of wetlands, but that has been permitted by through the Corps of Engineers permitting process. And that's where the roads are going over the creek. I understand. I don't think that will impact the limpkins. I think any kind of disturbance they're going to avoid. Maybe once the road is built, they'll probably start using that creek again. But a quarter acre of wetlands doesn't seem to be a huge disturbance to the limpkins. They'll just simply retreat into the swamp.
Okay. Do you think we should encourage the state to provide more protections for the limpkin now that the apple snail is increasing the presence?
That might be a possibility. The state itself, South Carolina DNR, has its own endangered and threatened species list, and also what they call a list of species of special concern. And though these birds not being here in the past is sort of something new for them to address. So, I have the contact information of the person and biologist who handles that list. And, we can certainly talk with her about what their thoughts are about elevating that species to more of a concern level within the state since it's new here.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions concerning the limpkins? And if anybody would like to unmute themselves to ask a question, you are more than welcome to. We just ask you to mute yourself once the question has been asked.
Sarah, do you have a question?
Yes, in addition to this terrible destruction of the environment, which we've seen after living here 20, 25 years, it's just heartbreaking. But even more important, I think, is the effect on the people living here. There are 1,400 people in Island Green now. The developer proposed to add 1,839 homes. Now, if you multiply that by 2 people, you're getting up over 3,000 more residents than are in here now. So altogether, there would be over 3,000 homes crunched in here on one golf course. And that would translate to over 6,000 people from the present 2,800 people. Mr. Williamson predicted there would be 8,000 trips on the one road, Sunahana. If you extrapolate this, 6,000 people times 2, that is over 12,000 trips on one road in one day. Now imagine that with ambulances and fire trucks coming in here. It would be a disaster. I'm wondering, Mr. Loftus, whether the planning board council has any recourse with the general council. Could you meet with the planning board and try to get some sort of limits at this point? I mean, it's going ahead so fast. I don't know how they would stop it. But are there any thoughts of trying to limit what's happening? Mr. Loftus.
Yes, I had to unmute me again. I've got some ideas. I'm not going to elaborate on it anymore now because I don't want to give any false hope in any way, shape, or form about where we might go from here. The Planning Commission is done with it. There's no more to be said. It was, and it's just what I don't understand is, I know y'all have been there, so I understand why you're there, but why are people even thinking about buying there if things are going to end up being like we know that they're going to be? I just don't understand. Why would you buy a house when you go down a pothole road to get to? But I guess the beach and the weather and all that good stuff is just a siren singing their song, and they just keep coming. But I've got some ideas, and I don't know what might transpire of them, but certainly I was there for an hour or more and saw those trucks going up and down Sunahana, and that in and of itself is kind of crazy. And obviously they aren't going to fix the road until the trucks are done. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to fix it. And I understand he said he's going to fix it. Is that true? Did he say it?
He said that after a certain phase of building, then the road would be fixed.
Is he going to turn it over to you?
That we
No.
know. And I just received a message that Mr. Williamson has turned the electric off on Sunahana, where our street lights are. So people coming in the evening do not have street lights. We no longer have the use of street lights on Sunahana to get into our own neighborhood.
Well, he won't even give you permission to get streetlights from Santee Cooper. They'll charge you for them, but they'll put them in. He doesn't have to do it.
He's taken away the buses. He's told the buses for the school children that live here, they're not allowed on Sunnyhanna. I'm waiting for a toll booth to come up at the entrance of Sunnyhanna now.
There's a note here about a county road. The county cannot take that road into the county system unless it's brought up to county standards, and it's a long way from that, even to our minimum standards.
Shouldn't he have been required to do that?
I'm sorry?
Shouldn't Mr. Williamson have been required by the planning board to bring it up to county standards?
Well, I can't answer. I can't speak for the planning commission. I know what would be done if I was on the planning commission, but and I'm sure that our current representative on the planning commission would have done the same thing had she been there then. But I can't require. The county council can't require him to do anything at this point other than go by whatever he submitted.
Well, knowing that Peach Creek is a natural creek, and Mr. Williamson has plans on building across that, possibly damaging the creek, this creek could possibly damage the federally protected National Wildlife Refuge. Is that a big concern?
If Peach Creek is federally protected, he can't do anything to it.
No, I'm sorry. The refuge, the Peach Creek comes through the refuge, and if he blocks that creek in any way, it will overflow into the refuge, which is federally protected land.
That I'd have to check with Mr. Roth, our stormwater guy. And it may be that Peach Creek isn't even recognized. Is Peach Creek even recognized by the Corps of Engineers? It may have been there forever and ever and ever, but if the Corps of Engineers doesn't recognize it as being there, is it,
Dr.
I don't know
Emermen,
the answer to that.
Dr. Emermen has found records that go as far back as 1943 about Peach Creek.
With the Corps of Engineers?
I could clarify that last point. If you go back to 1943, you see a Corps of Engineers map that shows the Peach Creek drainage system in exactly its current position, showing there's been no significant modification to the whole drainage network since 1943. There is a 1977 document by the Corps of Engineers that specifically calls Peach Creek a natural stream. And that's in my report. And there's U.S. Geological Survey document that uses the same language. So the Corps has recognized Peach Creek as a natural stream. The most recent permit gives permission to infill Peach Creek without clarifying that Peach Creek is a natural stream.
But that permit was issued by the Corps of Engineers.
That's right. That document's not online. That was obtained by Dawn through a Freedom of Information Act request.
And if the Corps of Engineers says he can do it, there's no way we can say he can't. And I wish we could. I mean, I know some other instances where the Corps of Engineers was sorely lacking. That has affected my mother-in-law, among others. And trust me, you don't want mother-in-law mad, and I did everything I could, but still the Corps of Engineers ruled.
Mr. Loftus or Ms. Dawson, could either one of you kind of explain? I know you mentioned that there was a lot that needed to be considered in order for the road to be classified as a county road. Could you kind of go into like a brief explanation of what that entails?
Well, I would have to yield to the folks at the county on our roads, or on our infrastructure and regulation people. I can tell you it isn't. It's not even close. As to whether it requires curb and gutter, I can't answer that. It's got to have a certain base, it's got to be able to handle certain weight vehicles and on and on and on and on. And it's a long way from being there. I happen to live in Deerfield, and we have 5.5 miles of our roads that we own, and the county, and they're in good shape because I painfully pay an HOA fee to keep them that way. And the county still won't take them because there's not curb and gutter. There's just, there's dishes on either side and things of that nature. Plus we have speed bumps. And so what is required to get those up to county standards, I could have somebody come out there and find out and give us an estimate on the cost. But Williamson knows exactly what it takes and how much it'll cost to do it. I know he knows that. That's why he's not doing it.
But Mr. Williamson wanted to sue the HOAs to help him pay to repair the road.
Well, do what we did. Say, we'll do it if you give us the roads. And we had the guy that owned our roads. We got him for next to nothing. But of course, we did allow him some certain access to the roads to do other developments, so we had a little leverage. And has Williamson come and asked for access to any of your roads? You don't have to give it to him.
Well, he bought the roads when he bought the property, but actually there is some discrepancy about a certain portion of Sunny Hannah that we have no idea who owns it.
Well, you can go to the courthouse and find that out.
Well, he owns at least the entrance. We know he owns the entrance of Sunny Hannah because he had us thrown off the entrance during our protest. So we know he owns at least that, and evidently owns enough of it to have the electricity turned off on the roads.
If you go to the office, the deed office, folks there can look that up and see who owns that road or who owns every piece of that road. And there are some gaps in there. There are some places that we don't know. So I don't know whether I know there's a portion of the road that's in question. Don't know exactly which portion it is, but if you go to the Register of Deeds, ROD, it's on the first floor of the county building. That's all I know. And Mr. Foxworth would be glad to help you look that up.
Okay, we had a question. It said, where exactly is the area that they plan on building the road over Peach Creek? Is it by Oak Estates? And if so, we have seen that they have started a road there.
Kirstie, do you want to pull up? I believe on the slideshow, it would be number. If you could bring up number 12. Okay. On the far left, the third arrow, one of the roads will be across. If you can see the creek right down from the large pond. The arrow is pointing right to the area where a road will be built there. And then the fourth arrow, that there's a golf cart path right there, just between the third and the fourth arrow. Up a little bit, right there. That's where the second road will be. Right now, there are 2 golf cart paths there. It's wide enough for a golf cart and then a couple feet of ground on each side. If they plan on putting a 2-lane road, it means damaging the creek in both areas. Because right now it's a golf cart path, literally a golf cart path wide with a couple feet on each side. A 2-lane road means damaging Peach Creek in both areas.
We still have some time for questions. Does anybody else have any questions they would like to ask regarding whether it's flooding, the single road situation, the extended number of individuals coming into the community, anything of any significance? You're more than welcome to either type it up into the chat bar, or if you would like to unmute yourself to ask the question, please unmute yourself, ask the question, and then mute yourself back once you are done.
I do want to say one more thing. Kirstie, if you could bring that slide back up, the same photo. Okay. Mr. Loftus, and this is also for Miss Dawson. Down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see an X.
Right?
This area, these wooded area right here, this is now what is called Island Green East. There are homes there now. During this time in 2001, it was still woods. But you can see there are 2 pathways to get to construction next to in the open space area. There was once a road for just construction to get to that came out on Freewoods Road. They literally, when building the homes there for this community, they sealed up that second entrance onto Freewoods and built a home. Did you realize that? I mean, did by any chance, did you have any idea that there was at one time a second entrance? It was mostly for construction, but
To answer your question, no. On 2001, I was busy dealing with high school kids at the motel, and hadn't even thought about county council. But it's not unusual to have a construction entrance to do work and then close the construction entrance after the construction is complete. That's not an unusual way to go, because it's obviously far easier for them to come in off of Freewoods Road than to go down SUNY Hannon and down there to get to it. So to build a construction road is not uncommon, and then close it off. There's several here in the Deerfield area. So that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't, one way or the other.
well, with so many homes in Island Green already, it wasn't thought about to maybe keep the entrance as a second entrance. I mean, we could use it now, most definitely.
Right.
You
Is
know,
there a house there?
there is a house there.
Yeah, well, that that presents a problem.
Right.
And I'll give an example is that they were talking about construction here in Deerfield about extending Prestwick Club Road. For those of you who might, when it comes out on 544, it's a traffic light of taking it over into Deerfield. And the gentleman that happened to own that lot quickly built a big, huge garage on it. I've never seen anything go up so fast in my life. So now it was a developed lot, which of course raised the price considerably. So that idea was quickly dismissed. So, you know, obviously you have to buy the house. I don't know how you're going to do that if the owner doesn't want to sell. You can, because the county could could do eminent domain, but since none of your roads are county roads, there would be no reason for the county to do that. And I know I'm not giving you answers you want to hear. I'm just trying to tell you what the county can and cannot do. And, you know, with all your roads being private and everything of that nature, why there isn't a whole lot the county can do.
Well, let me ask you, what he plans to do with Sunny Hannah is widen it, give us sidewalks. There will be a couple turn lanes in Island Green to turn left or right. And then at the entrance, give us a right turn lane out. And there will be a right turn lane in to Island Green. Do you think that's enough for our safety?
I can't answer that. You'll have to. We'd be happy to have somebody come out and if you have a drawing of it, can tell you whether that's good, bad, or how to modify it to make it work. Yeah, right now, there's no way I could tell you yes or no.
I have a question. Or maybe not a question, but more of a statement. When we were pushing Williamson to fix Sunny Hannah, he actually had told one of the HOAs that he would have us park on Freewoods because he would barricade it because he owns the front part and the back part, and then we don't know who is owning the middle. If we could find out who owns the rest of Sunny Hannah, we could actually maybe fight back and say, this, you know, you're not allowed with your trucks on this part of the road, and barricade him where he's not supposed to be.
Well, as I said, you go to the Register of Deeds, Mr. Foxworth's office on the first floor of the county building, and he should be able to tell you who owns what part of the road.
Am I on? In the county approval given to Mr. Williamson, it says the road is in question and the county cannot determine who owns it. So that's been examined before, I believe, and there's no answer.
There has to be an answer to that, though. There has to be an answer on who owns that. If he was able to buy it from someone, then we need to know. I mean, is there any way to know who he bought it from and how, you know, who owns the rest of it and why he only bought a part of it?
Has anybody looked up the tax map number? Is there a tax map number on it?
Oh.
Hi everybody, I'm Joyce. I'm sorry I'm in the dark over here, but I did end up going to the last 3 planning commission meetings up in Conway, and it's my understanding now with the road that Williamson has the entrance to Island Green up until St. Andrews, and the rest of the road is in question. There is no exact record to who owns that road. And somehow it was grandfathered in. That was my understanding with that. But I'd just like to also mention, you know, I came to South Carolina 9 years ago, actually yesterday. And I came for one reason and I stayed for another because I loved this area so much. In fact, I did rent a condo over in White Tree Lane for about 1.5 years, and I just loved Island Green so much. They had the opportunity to buy a condo here on Tall Oaks Court, which is all the way in the back, at the end of Sunihana, past the treetops. And I'll tell you what, I'm tearing up because the transformation that's happening is really unconscionable to me, that the county would allow this sort of building to go on. My concern is the residents who live here now. These buildings are wood. If there was a fire back here, I'll be toast along with my neighbors. There is no way to get out, and they're putting more houses behind me, past Fairwood Lakes. Those are big homes back there, so I'm assuming you're going to have families. So that means 2 cars, teenagers, maybe 4 cars. Where they're doing construction, the road is starting to cave in. I can't, I was fortunate to buy a brand new car. Every time I leave here, I cringe. I went out the other day, and that road, there's a piece of the road that's really caving in. If there was an emergency back here, God bless us all. It's very disheartening that our elected officials and the powers that be would even allow this to happen. It is unconscionable in my view. I appreciate Dawn and everybody's effort, but like Mr. Loftus said, this is a done deal. I don't know if there's any way, to even consider fighting this. The planning board approved it. I don't see how. But you know what? Just God bless us all if there's ever a fire or anything else. And I know at the end of my court, those condos back there, I haven't lived here long enough to know. I'll be here 3 years. But when they have hurricanes, those the condos at the bottom that are backed up to the refuge, I understand get flooded. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I have no plans on moving because I'm still loving it here. I see deer in the back of my yard, rabbits, raccoons. It's just awesome. That's my 2 cents. I just had to voice my opinion.
Mr. Loftus, not as a councilman, but as just a citizen of the county, how do you personally feel about the situation in Island Green with that many homes, that many people, and that single one-way and one-way out road?
Well, several words come to mind: stupid, insane. I could go on and on and on. It's unconscionable that there are developers that look for places like that where they can do things because they're sort of, I don't like the word grandfather, but they're, that they don't have to come to council for any changes or what they want to do. They can just get her done. And there's several other, if it makes you feel any better, which it won't, you aren't alone. It's happening in some other areas of the county, not to any great extent, but I've known some other areas where I've had to deal with Mr. Williamson, and I can honestly tell you, he sure is not one of my favorite people. But unfortunately, he knows where the loopholes are, and he takes advantage of them. But I just think the whole thing is just unconscionable, and wish I could do something about it. If it were the Wild West, I'd already done it.
Ms. Dawson,
Hi,
do you think there's any way to appeal this decision, to go back and to have somebody look it over to hold it for the time being?
Hi, I'm sorry I'm in the dark. Hi, Miss Swisher. It's nice to see you. I can't answer that. I imagine that's a legal matter, and I'm not qualified to weigh in on that. And I would like to comment one step further, and that is today's current, and it doesn't make you guys feel any better, I know, but in today's current land use regulations and zoning ordinances, a development like this would not meet our criteria in as much as the road width, having 2 points of access and egress. We have a lot of protections in place today for new developments. In this case, we were dealing with what was already there. Now, I may be wrong in saying this, and this is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking as a commissioner. I'm speaking from my personal opinion. My personal opinion is that if the HOAs had all been able to come together and cooperatively agreed to take responsibility for maintaining the road through some sort of a TIF, a tax program, or an abatement or a assessment program where they could have improved the road themselves, this may have been avoided. I have seen that happen, but that's a wish in one hand and the reality in another. And I'm sorry I was not part of the Planning Commission at the time this decision was made. I would have been a fervent no vote.
Well, the Son of Hannah Drive has been maintained for 30, 40 years. The community has maintained it. It's only recently where they've stopped, filling the holes because it does not belong to the community.
Well, I guess what I mean by maintaining is maintaining it to county standards. And I think it would have been cost prohibitive unless all the HOAs could have joined together, or at least that's my understanding. And I could be wrong about that, Ms. Swisher.
Right.
We did have another question. Mr. Loftus, I'm sure you can probably help answer this one. It says, when our homes are flooded, would we be able to, or eligible for the buyback program?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The buyback program that you were talking about earlier in the evening, if any of the homes in the Island Green community were to be flooded, would they be considered eligible for that buyback program?
I can't answer that, unfortunately. That's a program that I'll just be able to point you to the people that might be able to give you that answer. But I wish I could, but I can't. If you went out and repaired SUNY Hannah on your own, would Mr. Williamson care?
No, we were doing that for a long time. We, as residents, were taking care of it, and obviously not a great job, but some of the residents here would go buy asphalt and they would, all take turns and kind of do the potholes. But now that it's gotten so bad with the trucks and, since he's threatened us, I think one of the best ways is to really find out, try to find out who owns the rest of that road and stop him, barricade it like he threatened us. I think that's one of the only ways we're going to get anywhere with him.
The back way out of Deerfield going to the bypass is terrible. And it's a privately owned road, and I happen to know who owns it. They live in Tennessee, and they don't care to fix it. But they don't care if other people fill the potholes. It's improving their property. So they said have at it. But it's in bad shape. Might even be worse than SUNY Hannah, if that's possible.
The day of our protest, a gentleman here in Island Green, him and his sons went out and bought 500 pounds of asphalt and completely filled Sunny Hannah for money from his own pocket. And he filled them that day.
Maybe you guys have been over this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say the residents have taken care of that road much more than the developer.
Yeah, I think he's done it once this last time, and they actually did the hot asphalt where we don't have the ability to, warm it up and heat it up. So the ones that he did seem to be lasting a little bit longer than the ones that we do, because obviously we don't have the equipment to do them. We just try to put Band-Aids on them until, a truck runs over them and, starts breaking them apart.
We'll have to cold patch.
Correct. Yeah. Maybe you guys went over this. I was a little late. But is there a zoning law about how many homes can be in a one entrance community? Like, is there any, if there's going to be so many homes and a one way in and a one way out with all the safety we've been talking about, there's no zoning law or anything for that?
I have actually talked to fire marshals, and I have been told two different numbers. For a community with only one entrance and exit, the total number of homes should be 100, and then another one, I was told 88. And we are well over that limit. But from what I've been told, the only way to get the road fixed was for Williamson to build his homes. And I see other options to getting the road fixed other than more homes, more safety issues, more fear of safety.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the Island Green community had already been approved for that level of density intensity? So the design modification was not about whether or not the houses could be built. The houses were already included in the original master community plan. In fact, right? Isn't that correct?
Mr. Williamson had bought the property with a grandfathered plan from the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And at the time, 1,000 plus homes were not here.
Okay.
Yep.
And yes, today's zoning regulations do require that only a certain number of houses are allowed until there must be two points of access and egress. And that was part of the reason for the design modification.
You do realize that Horry County wasn't a county until 1980. There was no county government till the early 80s. So anything done in that area is just, we're talking about a great-grandfather. It's more than grandfather. And that's unfortunate that a lot of it was done. And up until then, the state senator pretty much ran the county. Mr. Stevens of Loris was, I think, our last senator that ran the county. But so, we're only 40 years old, or barely 40 years old. And I wish we were a lot more because of the growth that we're experiencing right now. Wish it were otherwise, but unfortunately, if I could change things back in the 80s, I'd sure do it.
I dare say there's no state in the United States where this could happen. There's something really wrong here.
Well, then, have you been to Mississippi?
No.
Or Arkansas or Alabama? it's a carbon copy. There's a lot of stuff going on in those states that's very similar. So.
Well, that's no excuse.
We aren't alone.
My thing is that I mean, he's disregarding the safety of this community because he has a grandfathered property that says it's okay for him to build. It's pure disregard for the people who are living here, knowing that it's overdeveloped. And it's the dollar signs that he's seeing and not thinking about any of us.
It would seem that it's pure illegal too. Like, I mean, if he bought it and didn't do anything with it, and now there's different rules or different zoning laws, how can he now build if the laws are what they are? Like if there was a red light and you couldn't turn right on red, but you could before, if somebody puts if the town puts a do not turn right on red and you do, you're still breaking the law. So I don't understand why he is getting such muscle in the town. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I'm sure, like, is it about the money? Because if our safety is,
it's all about the money. There's no other purpose. He doesn't care about y'all. Not one bit.
Right. But who in the town or who in the planning or zoning is allowing this to happen because of the money? He's got to go through someone.
Let me give an example, and I think this might just shed a little bit of light. For example, we had this case last week in a different community. That community, when it was originally designed, was approved for over 4,000 houses. It currently only has about 1,800. A developer came in and bought the golf course. Golf course was in financial difficulty. So it's sort of a similar situation, only this is a much newer community. Developer bought the golf course, and the developer decided what they wanted to do was take the driving range portion of it and build like 43 houses. Now, for the amount of acreage on that particular part, they could have put over 100 dwelling units. The community was very upset that the developer wanted to put these 100 houses on that little bit of acreage. The developer could have done it anyway. They were already approved for the dwelling units within the master plan community. Instead, they reduced the number of dwelling units. Now, roads weren't involved and all of that, but that's one of those examples where the master community was approved for a much higher number of dwelling units than currently exists. And that's sort of what happened at Island Green. It was approved for whatever that maximum number of units were. And now whoever bought it could hypothetically build that maximum number of units. What was precluding them was the regulation about having 2 points of access and egress. Thus the need for the design modification. So it gets real murky from there for me exactly why the Planning Commission and the Planning Department decided at that point to place conditions upon the design modification that would ultimately result in the road, Sunihana, being brought up to county standards. And I don't know what the ultimate dispensation of that road will be. Once it's brought up to county standards, is it then going to be taken into the county maintenance system? If that's the case, that would be not just the road, but the drainage along Sunihana as well. And that's when you really run into money. It's not just patching potholes. It's bringing the road bed itself up to standards, widening it, having the appropriate amount of right-of-ways, and the associated drainage. So there's a lot of money involved in doing that. If it was just patching potholes, it would be nice if people could just continue to do that. But for the long-term future, it would require a significantly larger investment, is my understanding. So
Well, they should have required him to bring it up to standard to meet the county's rules.
And I think we need to look at what the conditions of the design modification were.
I do need to bring up something about drainage. I have looked at the drainage in my part of Island Green because they would only send me my area where I live when I asked. And from what it looks like, the drains are forcing the water from the east side of Island Green to the west, meaning all the water flow from rain or even flooding is all being drained into the wildlife refuge next to me. Now, this new development, do they have plans to send their water to the refuge as well? Because the refuge is actually a higher elevation than Island Green, and that's all wetland, which means that water is coming back down into Island Green.
I can't answer that question.
Like, just something that needs to be recognized. I mean, the elevation of the refuge is much higher, and the water is going directly into the refuge. I have video of it all draining into the refuge.
Are you saying the water does not drain into the refuge, it's the other way?
Yeah, it's the water is draining from the east side of Island Green, and it goes into the refuge. All the water is the flow of it is all going into the refuge. And the refuge is a higher elevation than Island Green, so all that water is coming back down into Island Green.
Well, I'm not following, because if the water from Island Green goes to the refuge and the refuge is higher, it can't.
The water comes back down into Island Green because it can't go uphill. And with it being the refuge is wetland, and when it's so full of water, it just can't handle all the flow of the storm water. It comes right back down into Island Green.
That's in the existing Island Green?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that I can't speak to, because there's a whole different set of rules than when the existing Island Green was built.
Well, I'm just wondering if they have plans to do the same thing with the new development. Are they going to force that water?
They can't. On the new development has to go by the current stormwater regulations, which are, as I said, are pretty strict. And if they were any kind of neighbors at all, they might design their system to assist you a little bit as well, but kind of doubt that's happening.
I actually have an overflow ditch directly behind my house, and I see the water run from right to left, flowing straight into the refuge, and it just comes right back in.
Going north.
Real quick, guys, this is a 10-minute warning. We've got 10 more minutes.
I can tell you that it's my understanding our current Horry County stormwater regulations require that 20%, the property, the new development, has to hold 20% more of what it's holding today. And they do that typically by installing stormwater ponds. And if I remember correctly, and again, you would have to go back to the planning department and get the information from the planning director on exactly what the design modification include and what the conditions of that design modification were. If I remember correctly, there were no exceptions made regarding stormwater.
Yeah, it won't be. Yeah. Whatever he's building there has to meet the current stormwater regulations. You can't grandfather not doing that. That I know.
Okay, well, I thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, and I know it's been rough patches here and there, with this meeting, but I appreciate everyone that has come. Mr. Loftus, Dr. Emermen has already left. I appreciate him showing up and explaining to you about hopefully you understand about Peach Creek being a natural creek and everything, and what our worries are with them possibly damaging this creek. Thank you, Craig Watson, for more explanation about the Limpkin.
Yeah,
and
it's just a danger.
And
Right.
go ahead. Is somebody else wanting to talk?
I'm reading your summary, and I'm not a very good speed reader.
Yeah, so basically what we have up here is basically a summary of commitments and our next steps. So obviously we have to investigate whether filling of Peach Creek violates the Clear Water Act. So we're going to reach out to the Southern Environmental Law Center and ask the Waccamaw Wildlife Refuge to sit in on that call as well. We want to work directly with the planning department for further questions regarding the design and modification, specifically regarding the conditions. The AGU Thriving Earth Exchange collaboration with stakeholders on producing environmental studies that tackle flooding issues. So we want to keep an open dialogue with them, as well as the residents and the Planning Commission and the County Council. We want to look into the species of special concern list with the state that was mentioned by Mr. Watson. Mr. Loftus, your ideas on putting limits on the development, we want to look more into that. Asking the Stormwater Department to investigate the impacts of blocking Peach Creek, and of course looking into who owns Sunnyhanna, so trying to get that information from the records from the county. So that's just basically just a quick... Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, I have just one other thing.
Sure.
Keeping an open dialogue with Planning Commission. I would do that specifically by working with the planning director. Okay. Because the planning commissioners at this point are out of the loop. The decision has been made at Planning Commission, and the planning department can now direct you. I also would add to that list that if you have questions about how the new roadway is to be designed and what those design standards are, okay, that you would do that through the county engineering department, specifically Andy Markunis, right, Councilman Loftus?
Right.
So those are just the two things I thought I would throw in there. Let me look just a little bit further. County resident.
Pam, could you repeat the name that you said, Andy? What was his name?
Markunis. M as in Mary. Yes, M as in Mary, A-R-K-U-N as in Nancy, A-S. And he can answer a lot of those questions for you about this specific project. And I would invite all of you. I did in the chat box. I put in the link to the meeting where the design mod was approved, and there was a lot of conversation during that meeting about these conditions. So it might be just enlightening to take a look at that. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Dawson. Mr. Loftus, do you have any last words?
I've been married too long to even begin to think about the last words.
Totally
No, I don't have any last words.
I get that. Mr. Watson, is there anything that you would like to add to our next steps, or are you good as well?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Kirstie, are you good with everything?
Everything looks great. Just love listening to you all, and yeah, it was lovely to meet everyone here. Hopefully, I was able to capture some of the next steps for you all accurately.
Gabrielle, do you have any last thoughts? Did this bring up any points for our project?
So I guess just to kind of clarify a little bit, because I'm not sure how well it was captured in those bullet points. So we're still in the planning stage of this project. So in terms of it would be nice to keep dialogue open throughout. But if anyone has thoughts on how this project could be useful for them, or what information would be most useful, if you could share that with me sometime in the near future, it would be easier to incorporate into the project now while it's still in the planning stages. So that was kind of what the point that I was trying to make is, and I know we talked quite a bit about stormwater and flooding, and like I said, I'm not a flood expert, so I will have to, once we bring a scientist on board for the project, we'll have a better idea of what we can do, but it's possible that we could work those types of things into this project as well. So if there's any flood related questions or that people want answers to, or that if you would find a map helpful or whatever, it would be great to know about those things.
Just Mr. Loftus and Ms. Dawson, we are trying to have scientists help us with what development could do to this community, and our project could help you in future communities. So that's actually what we're trying to do is Gabrielle and the Thriving Earth Exchange.
I appreciate their expertise. Thank you.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude our town hall for this evening. I want to thank all of you guys for coming in and joining us. We definitely appreciate it. We have a lot of information here, both between what we've discussed this evening as well as what was in the chat. We will basically go from there. We will discuss some more and go through, take a look into some of these new items that we found, the stormwater department, the engineering department, about the scientists and things like that. And hopefully we'd be able to have another town hall in the next couple of months to be able to discuss a little bit further if we have any new bits of information. Once again, thank you guys so very much for joining us. You guys have a wonderful night and an amazing weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you, Shana.
Of course.
Love you.
No.
If you could see me, I'm doing the heart back too. And thank you, Kirstie. Thank you, Gabrielle.
You're welcome, John. I'll send you the, well, I guess you have the PowerPoint, so you can see the notes for next steps. And if I miss anything or misaccurately wrote something down, feel free to update it.
Okay. And Shana, are you still here?
Yes.
You have a video because I didn't catch the name of who Mr. Loftus said to talk to about the bus situation. I didn't catch
That
his
was
name. And
I can give you that name later. It's on the tip of my tongue right now, but I can't.
What was it? Cam Richardson?
Yes, that's
Yep.
it. I was like, I know his name because I don't know the gentleman personally, but I know of him. So, yeah.
Okay. And that would he be? No, he wouldn't be the same person to talk to about the electric. That
No.
Us no longer having electric on Sunny Hannah.
Okay. He's on the school board. So he would be the
Right, okay.
go-to person for the school district about what's going on.
Okay.
Let me know if you have any questions. My dog has been screaming at me for like 20 minutes to take him outside. So I'm gonna take him out. But I did take a lot of notes, so let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise we'll follow up soon.
Kirstie, if you think it's that
Okay,
bad,
thank you.
I threw out all 4 of my dogs plus my roommate. So they've been outside for the last 2 hours, and I'm sure they're ready to come in. So I totally get that.
That's hilarious.
Yep.
So funny. Well, you did a great job, Shana. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Anytime.
It was amazing. All right, see you guys. Have a good night.
You as well.
Good night, Kirstie.
Night.
Good night.
And Shana, yes. Thank you. I don't think I could have done this without you. I know my head was in such a fog from a whole lot of things. So, but yes, I appreciate it
It's no problem.
so much.
That's what I'm here for. I try to do what I can.
And Gabrielle, you're still here. Thank you. And Shana, I do need to get on the phone with you at some time when you have time or something I really need to talk to you about.
Give me a call sometime
who else
tomorrow.
Is still here? I don't have your number. You have to send me your number. You just call. I'll be home all day tomorrow. Just call me when you are able to.
Okay, that works.
And who else is?
All
who
right.
else is still here?
Have a good night,
Bernadette
guys.
and Tommy. Thank you all for coming. I hope.